You know the old studies that probably anybody who's ever taken an introduction to psych course learned from the 40s, where they crammed rats into smaller and smaller cages and discovered that at a certain point the rats actually started eating each other. They got super aggressive, and then ultimately they would even become cannibalistic, or at least eat their young. There's a second step to those experiments, which everybody is broadly familiar with. And again, probably you don't even have to take Intro to Psych to get it. It's part of our culture. And that's the story of rats that, and not just rats. This is done with, it's been done with chimps and other animals too, but the rats stories are the most famous ones, and the most well replicated, where they put a rat in a cage and they give it a little bar, and it can self-administer food, or it can self-administer morphine or heroin or cocaine. Your choice. And the rats will just keep self-administering the heroin or the cocaine until they die. They just, stop being interested in eating and just start getting interested in being high. And the takeaway message to all that is, gee, these are terrible, dangerous drugs, and therefore we need to have laws against drugs. Because look at this. You put rats in a cage and you give them all the heroin they want, and pretty soon they're not even eating. They're not reproducing, they're not eating, they're certainly not working, they're not good members of society. They're junkies. Well, as the late, great Paul Harvey would say, that's just half the story. And I find this fascinating. The other two parts of this are fascinating. First of all, this is over at Democratic Underground right now. Jesus Malverde has posted it. The headline is, "It's not the morphine, it's the size of the cage." The other part that's kind of funny about this is, DU now has ads. Maybe they always did. I just have recently noticed them. And the ad up at the top of my particular one, and so the ads typically reflect the things that you're buying, that you've bought. I think I've told you the story. I keep getting ads for T-shirts and for customized mugs and things, because we've, got that kind of stuff. We've bought that kind of stuff for our website, and so I've gone shopping for things like that. And they know what you're shopping for, right? And I keep saying, thank God I'm not shopping for porn on the web. But in any case, it's the ad up at the top is for Decon. Solving rodent problems for over 50 years. Learn how now. But I think that's because the content of the story, it's about rats. But here's the story. They redid the rat study. Only in this case, instead of basically tying the rat to the little tab and letting him have the food or the morphine, or stick him in a little tiny cage, they built this thing they called the rat park. Alexander built Rat Park, an 8.8 square meter, that's 95 square foot housing colony, 200 times the square footage of a standard laboratory cage. There were 16 to 20 rats of both sexes in residence, an abundance of food, balls, wheels for play, and enough space for mating and raising litters. Rats who had been forced to consume morphine hydrochloride for 57 consecutive days were brought to Rat Park. So these are rats who are already addicted. And given a choice between plain tap water and water laced with morphine. But now they're no longer trapped in this miserable little cage with a miserable little life. Now they're in the Rat Park. For the most part, Alexander wrote, they chose the plain water. Junkie rats. He said, nothing we tried produced anything that looked like addiction in rats that were housed in a reasonably normal environment. Control groups of rats isolated in small cages consumed much more morphine in this and subsequent experiments. In other words, our problem of addiction is not a problem of how horrible and addictive the drugs are, or even how in some case, I mean, maybe there's an argument for this, maybe not. I honestly don't know. But let's say not even necessarily the fact that some of us are predisposed to love addictive drugs. It's a problem of our society. It's a problem of our culture. We're living in the friggin' rat cages. You wonder, now the thing that would kind of contradict that is the occasional wealthy person or movie star who's an addict, famously. But on the other hand, I'm not a movie star or a wealthy person, but I've known a few of them, and that's its own kind of rat cage.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
So the takeaway from this is we should do what Portugal has done. A, decriminalize all drugs, and then B, build a strong social safety net so everybody lives in a rat park.